I'm Paulette, Kahalepuna, maiden name Kekueba, and I'm here at Ho'omau 2013 to share an art form that has become and has always, I think, without my realizing it, much of a passion for me, as it was for my teacher, who happened to be my mother, Mary Louise Kaleo Nahe Nahe Wentworth Peck Kekueba, and her teacher, Leilani Fernandez, and a few years ago found out that her teacher's name was Kupihea. And so in my sharing of this feather art process, not exactly as our kupuna did, but as close as we are able to today with the materials we have today. But what I try to encompass and bring to the students is an awareness of what our ancestors might have done, identifying plants and native surroundings that the birds might have been found at, how often they were gathered, if at all, the materials in the olana, which was the fiber used for the netting, and the thread, in how the feathers were gathered during molting season, and just relaying that part of our cultural identity in the makeup of how our ancestors had done their feather work, and then bringing it forward to today. It's been this is my second year, and I appreciated the invitation for last year's gathering, and then knowing that Herman Teixeira had been doing this as a challenge in when he and David and Teresa spoke about doing this gathering, that he wanted to include the cultural aspect, and being his passion on feather work, which he works on every day, is much of his life, and it's great. So in his making of these feather items, and knowing that my mother and I were both his teachers, and that Uncle Mike Vieira here in San Jose is that other force that is teaching and has instructed him on his feather work, are being honored by the interest. We have a number of students that are interested in feather work, but to the stepping forward and actually teaching, there are very few. And sometimes it's because of time, availability of your time to give to students. So it's nothing that you do every day, but unless you're really focused on it, sometimes it takes a long time. Focusing on it for a hula class, you need to do a feather lay, and or a high school project that you need to turn in for a term paper. The making of the feather items at one time was regarded as a craft. Well, it is a craft, but in as much as the verbiage of craft has evolved into more of a recognition of an art. And so for practitioners, which we are now being called, it's kind of interesting that where our mom and or aunties and uncles would do a particular thing, but it was just daily life, like pounding poi or gathering tea leaf to do cooking for a meal. These things were just everyday walk of life. Back in the ancient times, the feather capes and the helmets and the feather lei, which were made for our ali'i, was truly an art form, but never regarded in that respect, or not referred to in that respect. Today it is, because it's truly an art. The time that it takes to do, the creativity and the eye, to look at the feather and the depth, the length, and maybe technically we're using modern materials, but we're also looking at collections of feather capes in museums or kahili, things that can show us things from the past, from the 1300s, 1400s, or even later than that. But the birds themselves are either extinct or endangered, so we don't have that accessibility. But we can look at them and know that 5 to 7 feathers will make up, tied in a bundle, almost an equivalent of one feather today that's dyed goose. We don't need to do the bundling. the olona fiber, which had to be gathered, was as thin as a strand of spider web that today we use cotton or polyester thread, which are several strands, but it's easier for us to work with. Yarn, again, as a base material, where we use olona, we use yarn, and the consistency would be different in weight and so forth. And so here at Ho'omau, an audience of hula students, an audience, students who want to learn, an awareness of something that will complement something they're wearing or taking to a performance, wearing their papale or their hats and having it adorned with a hat made by themselves. Whether it be the humupapa style or the vilikoipoi or the lei kamoi, it's just something that just kind of gives you a little bit more brilliance and kind of calls attention to an overall look. But the camaraderie itself, the people that come, the interest in the ukulele, guitar, in those sounds of whether it's a single strum or multiple strum. A famous story by Reverend Abraham Akaka, whenever he would give his sermons, his famous was applying the ukulele to the congregation or to the world. You had 4 strings, and that was his basic ukulele. You know, singularly they made a sound, but together the harmony that came from it. You know, it wasn't just plunking on one key, because then it becomes boring. It just becomes one note. But together you put 2 and 3 and 4 or 7 or whatever the case might be, and what it blends together, what it brings together is a harmony and a melting of voices, thoughts, word and deed, to a place that people come to appreciate, some more than others, and whoever's heart you kind of touch in that blending of color, in the case of the feathers, or the technique of making a Mauna Loa style of lei, or a Lokilani style of lei, or a humupapa hat band. It's all just a harmonious blending. So I want to thank the coordinators and in Kavika and Terry and Herman. Meeting Herman many years ago and meeting more of his family, knowing there's a connection back home with the Mossmans and so forth, it just makes it all much more blessed. So thank you so very much for allowing me to be a part of this sharing. Aloha.